Hey, it's Mr. Marlowe again. We're going to do some work today with circles, circumference, and area in particular. We're going to look at the parts of a circle first. Obviously, here's your circle. Okay. All the way across the circle, through the middle of the circle, through the center, is your diameter. Most often referenced as D. From the center to the outside of the circle, in the red there, is your radius. And of course we call that R. Diameter goes all the way across. The radius only halfway across. We now know that the diameter is equal to 2 times the radius. Or if you prefer, if you're given the diameter and you want the radius, you divide by 2. Okay? Now, this out here, part of it is referencing the distance around the circle, the circumference. And in this video, we're not going to discuss it. We're just going to take it as truth. They discovered that if you carefully measure the distance around your circle, your circumference, call it C, and if you then carefully measured the diameter, D, if you divided those two numbers, no matter how many circles you do, as long as you are careful, you will always come out with the same ratio. And they call it pi, the Greek letter pi. And we normally, most of the time, when we want to approximate pi, we use 3.14 in our class. And of course, you probably already know, pi is a number that does not have a repeating pattern, nor does it terminate. It's an irrational number. But we're just going to focus on the fact that it comes from measuring the circumference all the way around the circle and dividing it by the distance across the circle through the middle of the diameter. You always get pi. Okay, so very quickly, we're going to just go ahead and show you the two formulas that we're concerned with a circle. Circumference. Okay. The circumference of a circle can be found by multiplying pi times the diameter. Okay. And again, if you just multiply both sides of this by D, that's what you come up with. Now, in my class, okay, to avoid mistakes, I generally like to reference the circumference formula in terms of the radius instead of the diameter. The formula I like to use is 2 pi r. And that is because we just wrote here that the diameter is 2 times r. So pi times 2 times r, and there you go. All right? And again, for another video, we could also prove this next formula, and that's the formula for area. But we're not going to here. It is pi r squared. Since both of these formulas right here reference the radius, I like to encourage my students to focus on 2 pi r as the circumference formula. Okay? You can use pi times diameter, even in my class, as long as you're showing that. And another thing, a little trick I like to use to avoid careless mistakes is for the area, I like to call it R times R, because in 7th grade in particular, but across high school, when I taught at high schools, pi r squared would wind up becoming pi times r times 2, because that r squared becomes r times 2. But so that's how I reference them. Again, that's just because I think fewer mistakes happen. So let's just do 2 examples where we find the circumference and the area of a circle. We're going to start with this one, okay? And just going to make up a number that seems good to us. We're going to call it 10 inches. Okay, so here's how I suggest you start the problem. First of all, you know it's a circle. It's round. Makes it a circle. This line goes all the way across the circle. It doesn't matter that it's at an angle. It goes all the way across through the center. That makes it the diameter of the circle. So the first thing I encourage my students to do is to identify the radius. If the diameter is 10, the radius is going to be the diameter divided by 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5 inches. Okay? So let me erase over here. And we're going to do our formulas for area and circumference. We'll start with circumference. The circumference formula is 2 times pi. Now, you can leave pi in there and, you know, times 5. And of course, you would get 10 pi. And you're probably saying, Mr. Marlowe, why wouldn't you just use the 10? Because that's what you wind up with, because your formula is pi times diameter. The reason I don't is because frequently I ask my students to find the circumference and the area in the same problem. And since you need the radius to find the area, might as well do that for circumference as well. But anyway, back to the issue at hand. If you wanted to, you could just leave pi in, because the world around people recognize pi as 3.14 or whatever. But that was just for illustration. The way we do it in the class is we say 2 times 3.14 times the radius. Okay? Oh, I forgot up here, we know that this is not just 10 times pi. We know that this is 10 times pi inches. So down here, 2 times 3.14 times 5, it's approximately 31.4 inches. And there you go. So that's the circumference of that circle. Area is equal to pi, and we're going to go ahead and use 3.14 for that, times the radius, which is 5, times the radius again. Again, it's just 5 squared, and yes, that's 25, and that would be fine. But again, in my experience, people frequently do 5 times 2 instead. So I have it set up, 3.14 times 5 times 5. And I'm not familiar with this calculator, so I didn't hit equals. Let me try it again. 3.14 times 5 times 5, there's the equal sign. And that gives me 78.5 inches. And remember that area is always written in square units. Because we did right here, we just multiplied inches times inches. And anything times itself is inches squared. So that is how I suggest, not the only way, but it's how I suggest you find the circumference and area of a circle when you're given the diameter. Find the radius by dividing by 2, and then plug it into the formulas. Okay? Let me clear the board. I'm going to pull up another example. So please go ahead and give me the other circle. A little further, come on. And one more. One more down. There you go. Okay, so this time, let's just do, 4. And we'll call it feet. Okay? So, here we go. Again, find the radius. In this case, we're already given the radius. It's only halfway across. So, I don't have to do any division. I got R is 4 feet. So, I want to find the circumference. The circumference is equal to, again, 2 times pi, and we're going to go ahead and put in 3.14, times the radius, which was 4. And again, I have to say, yes, you could say that the diameter of this thing is 8 and do 8 times 3.14. But like I said, I just really believe that it doesn't take much longer, and it just seems like it cuts down on some careless mistakes. 2 times 3.14 times 4 is 25.12. We were measuring in feet, and so this is just feet. All right, and now the area, and we'll wrap this video up. The area formula, again, is pi 3.14 times the radius, which is 4, squared. And again, for purposes of avoiding careless mistakes, I do encourage writing it out as 4 times 4. So now that I've got it, clear my calculator, 3.14 times 4 times 4 again, and I get 50.24, and it's an area, so we do use squared units. So that is how I recommend or encourage my students to approach circle problems, using the formula for circumference that involves the radius, because the area uses the same radius. And that way, I have my students focusing on the radius of the circle, and the diameter doesn't all of a sudden appear in the area formula. So there you go. I hope that helped a little bit, and we'll see you next time.